Is that feedback? Oh, that's feedback. And it's gone now. Good job. That was fast. What's up? What's up, family? Peace and love. Welcome. I'm so excited to have you guys here. And you've tuned in yet another day, but you know what has to happen. Before we get going, moving and shaking and rolling, I need to make sure we have all of our tribe involved. Share this out on your network right now. Create a watch party. Go over to YouTube and find us at CTN Media, where we're changing the narrative with you. This conversation is going to get real juicy, real good today. So I promise you want to share this out immediately. Welcome to 7 Generations Black, a podcast powered to equip, inform, clear your lens, and present you with a new perspective. With my guy, Theo E.J. Wilson, H. Soul, Lethal, Jice Johnson, and I'm Shay J. And we are 7 Generations Black. Man, we're in season 2, y'all. Season 2, episode 7. I hope you've been watching. And if you know, we have went from one extreme to the next, but it's all through a 7 generational lens. This has been powered by the Black Business Initiative. If you're looking to start, scale, or grow Black business, Black professionals, we are the place for you. Go on over and check us out at www.bbiprofessional.com. Now, let's get into this thing. I want to introduce you to our topic today. Today, we're going to be talking about internalized violent white racism. Not white supremacy, because we don't use this here at 7 Generations Black. Internalized violent white racism. If COVID-19 has showed us nothing else, it has highlighted the economic disparities and inequalities that are in our community and that we face. That is not the only thing happening here in the US, but also globally. What does it look like for Black people across the globe to claim and then reclaim autonomy and self-determination to enable us to represent our own interests? Do we even know what our own interests are anymore? I don't know. We're going to find out. But let me hit you with the red pill alert. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. This is your opportunity to stop listening and tune out now. Well, if you do, the story ends. And you can wake up in your bed and believe whatever it is you want to believe. However, if you take this 7 generations red pill, well, you stay here with us in a liberatory discussion, and we show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. You know what it is. The choice is always yours. Welcome to 7 Generations Black. Again, in case you forgot who my panel is, or if it's your first time tuning in, my guy, Theo E.J. Wilson of Shop Talk Live, the Honorable Protector Initiative, Mr. Lethal.
Shout out to the family in Brooklyn.
Oh, I like that. I like that shirt.
Truth, know thyself. Yeah.
He always has his t-shirts on point. The Righteous Rage Institute, Mr. H. Soul. The Black Business Initiative, the one and only Jice Johnson. And it's time for some 7 Generations Black. Again, this week we're talking about what we should have been talking about a long time ago. So I hope you guys are tuned in. Internalized violent white racism. Share this out on your network right now. Let's get this conversation going. And as much as we tell you each week, I want to tell you again, make sure you communicate with us. This conversation is for the community. So make sure you tap in, stay engaged, and keep supporting independent Black media. When I was thinking about this topic, one of the big things that really hit me was a quote, and one of my favorite quotes when we talk about this type of subject. And so the quote goes, "You know, it's not what the world that was my oppressor, because what the world does to you, if the world does it long enough and effectively enough, you begin to do it to yourself." None other than James Baldwin. That's when I think about internalized racism and what it really looks like. Theo, I would love for you to just hit this topic off. What is internalized racism? How does it affect us? And just a little bit of laying it on the line of what we're going to kind of talk about today.
Thank you very much for that. Internalized racism is simply the effects of abuse. It's what happens when you begin to view yourself through the lens of your oppressor. That's it. And it's an inevitable outcome ultimately. When I tell this to kids, I teach this at schools. If you were to take a kid and you beat the kid and you say you're bad, you're worthless, you never amount to anything, after a while, what's going to happen to that kid? He's going to internalize the message. He's going to say, I'm bad, I'm worthless, I never amount to anything. Now consider the fact that in the early transatlantic slave trade, the slavers began to realize that children were more effective to be taken than adults because of the fact that revolts happened so often on the ships. And literally British insurance companies had to insure slave ships because African adults were rising up and killing their captors so often. They had to insure the ships. So what they started doing was they started capturing children. And when you capture children, you have a twofold effect. Number one, smaller bodies, bigger profits, more of them fit on the ship. And number two, their subconsciouses are more malleable. Their emotions are more vulnerable to whatever programming that you have to put into them via the abuse. And so you're looking at how many generations where we were like 20 to 25 generations under the lash, not being able to even view ourselves as human. They say the worst day in mental health in America was the day of emancipation, because what happened is you have all these human beings that have been treated like nothing but cattle suddenly released upon the world and say, hey, Negro, go live your lives. So when you talk about how that gets passed down, that gauntlet of environmental learning is there's no telling what toxicity cascades down to generations, and it shows up in our politics, it shows up in our mating and dating, it shows up in so many ways. And I feel that this is the monster that we really have to unpack and destroy, because as my elder said, the Black man is indestructible, but self-destructible. The Black woman is indestructible, but self-destructible, meaning once we get this over this hurdle, we are indestructible. And that's why we got to address internalized racism.
Got so many jewels in there, and I'm really I love that what you did is that you talked about it and the verbiage of when we think about children and the conversation we're having with children and the conversation that starts to be internalized. Excuse me, Lethal, when you really start to unpack internalized racism, can you speak a little bit to that and why we took out that word white supremacy and how we look at this in our 7-generational lens?
Yeah, thanks for that, Shay. Good intro and good definition, Theo. I think it's important that we always provide a definition or an explanation to the audience, so that we're always standing on a firm level platform of in agreement with each other. That's important. So supreme, right? I don't think that it is appropriate for us to perpetuate this ideology of whites being supreme, right? Because they're not supreme. Because who are the originators of humanity and what it means to be humane? Africans. You see what I'm saying? Who was first? Africans. And even though we may not know because we have been miseducated and maleducated, right? We're the ones who are the original inventors of exploration and just the original inventors of anything that we need to survive as a race of people, period. That in my book does not make them supreme over me. You understand what I'm saying? Or over us. As I said before, I, we, me, us, I use them all interchangeably. They mean the same thing. So then what are they? Are they violent? Yes. Are they white? Yes. Are they racist? Yes. And are they extreme about it? Yes. So then they are violent, white, racist extremists operating in a system of violent white racism and extremism. That's what they are. That's who they are. And unfortunately, that's who we are dealing with. And whether we like it, know it, want to believe it or not, and it really does sadden and bother my heart sometimes that more of us are not aware. But recently here, someone told me that, you know, a race war is coming. And I said, a race war is coming? Is coming? That's future. Race war's been here. From the moment they stepped their ass onto the continent of the motherland, of where humanity began as a jealous race of degenerates, we've been in a race war. It's never not been a time where we haven't been in a race war, right? And so to your specific point, your specific question, they're not supreme, they're violent, they're white, they're racist, and they're extremists, and we call them out for who and what they are. And the problem is that their ideology and ideas about us, as Brother Theo spoke, right, earlier in the monologue, opening up, has been beaten down upon us for 25 X number of generations. You know what I'm saying? And so for us, based off my reading and whatnot, internalized violent white racism is a mental health issue. And we need to deal with each other from that perspective, that we have a collective mental health problem.
Whoa. That was huge. Man, you hit something so huge. And we've been talking about more and more about the mental health of our people because it's been swept under the rug for years. We haven't been able to talk about this and make it okay. I think it's such an important topic when we really start thinking about the mental state that it's put us in. How does it affect who we are today, Jice? When you think about who we are today as a people, the lack of community, the lack of even awareness of what we actually want, what's important to us as people, how has all these things been affected by internalized racism?
That's a loaded question. I mean, first of all, do Black people even know who they are? I mean, everything from what we identify as. Some people say Black, African American, or they identify as, a variety of these things.
Hebrew, right? Indian niggas, Native Americans to the last 10 years.
We don't even know how to identify, right? And so, and I've had several conversations with people because I choose to say Black. I feel like it's all encompassing. We start getting down to foundational Black Americans or American descendants of slavery versus Black versus immigrants. I mean, it just gets to be very convoluted, right? And so I think that, one of the things is it's hard at times for people to figure out where they fit in the fight because they're not quite sure about who they are. And so one of the most liberating things that I feel like I've ever done is clearly identify what I feel best in, why I feel like that's the best, way for me to identify. And that piece, once that's removed, it allows me to focus in on the fight. And so, and I think when people have that disconnect, it allows them to think about themselves and not think about the collective as well, right? Because they can't even see the collective if they see everyone as being fractioned off or different. If they see themselves as othered, then it makes them, struggle around what that looks like for them and what their role is in our fight for liberation. So, or if there is a fight for liberation. So,
that was my next question. Is there a fight for liberation? And is that the first step of us getting all on one accord and saying, hey, y'all, can we disagree to be Black or can we disagree? Do we need to get on one accord or is that even relevant at this point?
So I'll jump back in on this. I think that before we can get on one accord, right, and getting on one accord can be applicable to any number of different things, right? But before we get on one accord with regards to where it is we want to go as far as liberation is concerned, right, which will be televised, by the way, I think we need to get on a one accord with regards to we are a people who, based off of, more than 25 years of oppression and aggression at the hands of white racist extremists, we need to seek an African-centered mental health program. That's what we need to get into because we have to find ourselves. One of the reasons why you guys always hear me, brothers and sisters, I don't say guy, that's, brothers and sisters, you always hear me referring to the knowledge and wisdom of our elders and ancestors is because it's me choosing to reconnect to them because nothing we are experiencing today is new. This shit is old. We've always been at war. Like, what the fuck? Why don't we understand that? You know what I'm saying? It's nothing new, right? And so we have to go back and check the wisdom and the knowledge of our elders and our ancestors because, listen, we've just gotten so far disconnected from them.
That's good. So I'd love you to go ahead and answer that question. We just got through one of our audience participants. How do we fight if there is no unity? You
don't fight.
You can't.
You can't.
And that's
right. But here's the thing I want to point out. I want to point out one thing. Not everybody who's Black American, foundational Black American, otherwise, supported MLK. And not everybody who's Black American, whatever the case may be, supported Malcolm X or supported Amos Wilson or supported Dr. Yusuf bin Yaqanan. So we don't need all of us. We just need the dedicated and the committed few to stay that damn course, which is what we're doing here. We're staying the course. 7 generations Black.
Oh, shameless plug. Those of you tuning in, do me a favor, share this out right now on your network, 7 Generations Black. We want to make sure we're having this conversation with you because we really do believe that this is the beginning of change when we start to have these conversations. So when I think about, when we start talking about how this plays into institutional racism, from housing, banks, educational, criminal justice, public health, all these things play into it. The spectrum of internal hate and trauma, how do you feel like that plays into institutional racism as well?
So ask me that question again, or ask us.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read this too. I'm trying to read your comment at the same time.
She's talking about emancipation.
Okay. Well, give us the information, sis. Let's figure out how we link into this. So the spectrum of internal hate and trauma, how does it play into institutional racism?
I mean, so this is where, to me, I see it affect us the most, right? I think we talk about, well, first of all, let me just preface this with, I absolutely hate the phrase Black on Black crime. And I only use it to describe the fact that there is no such thing as Black on Black crime. However, that being said, I think we see it in two places, right? We see it when we're talking about the violence that we inflict on each other. And then the other side that we see it is when people in positions of power use their power to inflict it on the Black community. And they are a front face for violent white racism or the violent white racist systems. And they become a place of comfort for us because they look like us. And where are you? There you go. H used to say, right?
Wait. Yeah.
H used to say, what there was a proverb that you talk about with the trees. The
axe and the tree.
There we go. That one. And that so say
Can you say it to us, H, please? Because she's not gonna
it's actually a whole axiom that talks about that the trees noticed the axe coming into the forest and said that the handle is one of us. So that's why it was allowed to come into the forest and decimate the forest, because the handle was one of us.
And that right there is what we see, right? Is what happens when one of us is crafted and shaped and molded as a tool of violent white racism. And why we struggle to see that. What'd you say?
I said Obama.
First shot fired. But you know what? We struggle to see that, right? And so so to me, the conversation takes place around those two, pivotal areas. Is what happens when we have tools that are shaped, for violent white racism, that look like us, so we talk about all skin folk and kinfolk. And then the other side is what happens and why do we inflict such harm on each other, or towards each other in ways that we will not, or that we refuse to inflict on other communities. Why is it easier for us to go around and hurt each other? And why is George Zimmerman still walking this fucking earth?
That's all I want to know.
I would put money on whoever's books all day.
Period.
I just would, and I would lose no sleep. So, but why is he still walking around? And yet, when we harm each other, when we have wronged each other, then we inflict this harm towards each other, that we talk a good talk about what it looks like to do something outside of our community, but that's not where we walk. And so we're not being put in jail for harming the white community. We are in jail for harming our own community.
Man, Jice, you hit so many things, and I see you guys with the Daniel he called him Qumran, Daniel Cameron, which is a great point. When you think about people like Daniel Cameron, your Stacey Dashes, your Candace Owens, all these people that are in places. H-So has other shots to fire. He can shoot the rest of the time.
We can go local, we can go national,
however we want to go. When
right.
we think about these people, how do we deal with these people? I think even recently, Candace Owens, I think that one also was for a loop. Those of you who are like, who's Candace Owens? She's a 31-year-old Black conservative who she really came out when the George Floyd event. She's always been on the scene, but when George Floyd hit, she came out and she really spoke against it. She spoke against Black Lives Matter. She spoke against making him our martyr, saying that he was a criminal, and she brought forth his record. And, she became a fan in Trump. She became Trump's girl after this happened. And so she's been really going around having these conversations and stirring them up. And then she's done a thing where she's created a group where she's asking them to move from being Democrats to go to another place with her. And so she's been doing all these things, but she's a Black woman.
She's a sellout.
Can I say something about that?
You can.
Can I say something about it?
Say something about it. Say something
Let me say
about it.
something about it. Okay, first of all, let me tell you something. This is how it works. I'm on the speaker circuit. When you go to the speaker circuit in the universities, there are student groups that bring you in. And based on the funding of these student groups, depends on what your check is. When I tell you that the dough for being a Black conservative is about 4 times what it is for speaking on some pro-Black topics, right? I do my speeches at universities and they're all about like literally how did we get to where we are where racism resurged, or should I say reemerged into the public spotlight. And that's considered on the left wing of things. But a right wing Black speaker, the thirst and the hunger from white America is so powerful to hear a Black face say their white thoughts that they compensate the living hell out of you. And how do I know this? Because they came for me. They actually tried to come for me, and they actually tried to say, listen, if you could say something that unified us, that kind of healed the racial divisions and what they wanted me to do was frame the conversation where the racial division was on Black people's shoulders. This is why we're divided, because we keep talking about race.
Yeah, that's the reason.
And I said,
it's not because of all the disparities. It's not because of all the killings. It's not because of all the fucked up systems. It's because we keep talking about it.
But when I tell you conservative groups are willing to pay 4 times as much as I get paid, that's how it happens. So Candace Owens also, like literally won a discrimination lawsuit in 2008. So the institutional racism that she says does not exist, she literally
benefited from it.
Like won a lawsuit saying that it does like that. She won 37,000. She got 37,000 reasons to say that institutional racism does exist. But she messed around and forgot all about that. Why? Because it's so lucrative to speak as a Black conservative. So what I said is, so this is why she's dangerous, because of the context that we're in. It's not just the fact that she has a quote talking point. It's just that white America's listening to her talking points. And there's a hunger in that community to deflect from the responsibility of looking squarely into the inheritance of violent white supremacy, violent white racism, and healing that wound on their end and saying, no, it's not our responsibility, it's yours. Black people, stop talking about race and race will go away. And anybody who's in therapy knows that it doesn't matter if you don't talk about it. It'll be there beneath the surface, festering and driving your behavior. Any therapist will tell you that shit. See what I'm saying? And so that's why she's doing it, because the dough is ridiculous and she didn't have the moral fortitude to resist that kind of dough. See what I'm saying? That's
Can
what it
someone
is.
do us a favor and get the definition of sellout so we can post that up on here?
Yes, let's get that going.
It's literally a selling. Look, dude, it's literally a selling out.
Yeah.
You feel me? Like it's for the almighty dollar. I done heard white liberals be like, that Black woman's a sellout. Like literally. And what's happening is like a lot of like the white ally or accomplice or abolitionist types are trying to be like, okay, I got to use my privilege to speak up for Black lives. I'm not part of the organization Black Lives Matter, but I got to do something to speak out against racism. And they're running into the Candace Owenses of the world and are confused as shit. They're like, wait, you're Black. I'm trying to fight for you. But what are you doing? Like, and so they're running into that more and more. So this is a thing. See what I'm saying?
Okay. Here's the thing with all that, right? I think the point that cannot be missed that Theo's making is that she's being paid to do it, right? 4 times the amount. So she's not the source.
Right.
There's a source that's paying for that. And that same source that's paying for that, listen, I could ask this panel, when's the last time that they heard of a Jewish Holocaust denier?
Never. I'm from Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Very heavily populated Jewish community on one side of the street, Muslim 5% on the other side of the street, our own little internal Gaza Strip in Brooklyn, right? And you will never, ever, ever hear of a Jewish person being a denier of Hitler's Holocaust against them. In fact, if you are not a Jewish person and you don't acknowledge it, they come after your ass.
Ask Nick Cannon.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Right. But here's the thing. The system that we're talking about is what creates the opportunity for sellouts, right? Because we're in this system, like if you think about the whole process of meritorious emissions and that idea, right? That whole idea is based on you individually can have a different level of comfort if you are willing to feed us information, tell on, disrupt anything that would mess up our system. So today, when you have to remove, the actual physical chains of slavery, what we're seeing now is you have an opportunity to climb the corporate ladder. You have an opportunity to climb the political ladder. You have an opportunity to come and sit at this table, even if at the table we're making fun of you, right? And so I don't know if anyone has seen this article. There's an article going around where, it's one of the banks. It is going to come to me in a second, but there is a bank that a bank that is on the global setting, and it had its first Black CEO, right? And so this is an African guy, and he's the only Black CEO in this space. And I'm gonna find it as soon as I'm not the one talking, so I can post it, the accurate details. But essentially, he ended up getting booted out, right? So now that he's gone, he's talking about how he went to one of the dinners that they held, and at the dinner, the entertainment was basically blackface. I mean, the entertainment was having a Black person on stage as a janitor doing these shuffling dances, watermelon jokes, blackface. I mean, and he's just sitting here. So he sits here, and now that he's gone, he's talking about all the different things that he sat through. And although I feel his pain that he's gone, like, nigga, you sat through all these things, and you didn't say nothing. I would have interrupted the dinner right there. Like, I'm sorry, what's all this? Help me understand what we're doing here. But because we can't do that, right? Because you don't want to disrupt your paycheck. You don't want to disrupt your benefits. You don't want to disrupt your insurance. You don't want to be discomforted. You don't want to speak out because you might not get elected a second term or a third term. And sometimes we think that it is most beneficial to us to get elected a second and a third term, so then really we could do the work, right? Because that was kind of the thing with Obama, like, oh, well, Obama can't do really nothing for us this first term. We have to wait to his second term, so then he don't have no restraints. Then it's all, no bars hold. Like, what kind of strategy is that? What kind of strategy is it that you would think that it's okay for you to continue to hurt and harm your people for 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, whatever your term is, and then get to the end of your term and then say, oh yeah, by the way, now I can do something for my people because I'm facing re-election. So you're a part of the process and a problem, and we keep getting put in these positions that make sellouts possible.
Well,
thank you, Brother Dante. Thank you, Brother Dante, for that definition.
Yeah, that real one. Thank you.
to the original point, and I think it's important that we continue to contextualize this particular point. That it is a form, and this goes back to what Brother Lethal was talking about, having an African mental health view. It is a form of mental illness when people behave in that manner. And so it's incumbent upon us to frame it that way so that we understand that to a particular degree, that's not a matter of a conscious choice that people are making in those moments. It's a subconscious choice that has been ingrained in them through violence, through years of violence, through generations of violence. And so we have to contextualize it that way, or else we will begin to demonize our own people that don't line with our particular belief system, as correct as we may be. And what we'll fail to do if we do that is to properly identify the original illness or the source of the original illness, which is, as my brother Lethal was talking about, the definition, we're not using white supremacy, white violence, Jimmy Jam. So that's important, is that we always put the onus of the burden, the source of the issue on them. Even though our people are the axe handles, they are taken to the forest by those who are violent and want to see violence enacted on us.
I think you make a great point there. Those of you just now joining us, this might be your first walk with us on 7 Generations Black. Share this out on your network. Keep engaging. We're loving all the comments coming in. This is how we build community conversation. You know, a lot of people are saying too, what are the signs that know that I'm dealing with internalized racism? Because like you're saying, everybody's not in that position. They don't know. They've been used to this for so many years and just thinking in the same process. What does this look like to really identify these signs? And so those of you that are at home saying, what are these signs? I think there's millions of signs. Theo's is going to give you like 50 of them. I'm going to give you maybe one. But I think one thing that Jice kind of touched on is, do I belong here? When you start getting in places and you say, do I belong here? Because you're doubting your abilities, you're doubting your worth, you're doubting that space and doubting how do you speak in those situations? Does my opinion matter? Should I speak out? Do I sound like the angry Black woman? I know we have to always look at that stereotype. I'm like, am I too passionate right now? Is it coming across angry? How should I become a little bit more docile? Are they going to say I'm just like everybody else? Like really dealing with those things. Come off of mute. Where you at?
I didn't mean to mute. And I don't even feel like those things matter, but that's what it looks like when you start to create your own world, right? Like I pulled my kids out of school. I work for myself, so I don't give a fuck. But we still have to operate inside of the systems that be, right? But at the same time, like I withdrew from as many of those systems as I could so that when I do walk in, I can walk in my space of authenticity. But that is not afforded and allotted to everyone. And I get that 100%, right? We're all not going to homeschool our children. We're all not going to work for ourselves. At some point, you will work for somebody else. So we do have to think about how we show up and how we change the systems. But also, as more of us come up, we have to think about how we allow and open up doors for other people, right? So like we have a staff of 4. We got 4 Black women that work for us. That's 4 Black women who don't have to go out into the rest of the world and deal with that bullshit out there. So they get to work in an environment that's conducive for them, right? And God willing, we'll open up more doors for more of them. But so how do we?
The question becomes to you, and I ask you this as a CEO: what are the particular signs of either Black mental health or Black mental illness? I think that's what.
Let me get on this.
Okay.
Let me get on this because one of the primary symptoms actually shows up not as self-hatred, but as shame at Black people. Yeah. When Black people make you feel ashamed, or it triggers a shame response inside of your body. And to a certain extent, we all got this thing in us like, man, please don't be loud and ratchet and ugly in front of white folks. You see what I'm saying? Like we all got that thing a little bit like, man, didn't your mama raise you no better than that? You know, white folks are looking at you, right? But then it goes a little deeper than that, right? Because it goes deeper into the fact that even if we show up in our strength, like let's say you're ashamed that another Black person shows up and says their actual truth, right? And you begin to actively try to shut that other Black person down. Then you got the syndrome of these my white folks, find your own. You know what I'm saying?
Ooh, say that again.
I want to be the only one in this group.
Right. I am the token Black dude. Thank you very much. What are you doing? Right. And so what happens is you begin to compete for the attention, as Tariq Nasheed calls the butted biscuits of white approval. And I think that we have to figure out, we always, and I think Asho brings up a great point. It is all a symptom of disempowerment. It is all a symptom of having your own sovereignty and autonomy and what is that word? Agency taken away from you. You see what I'm saying? Context is everything, because the context of this behavior is not the fact. And one of the greatest things is estimating that there's something deeper pathological about Black folks than there is about anybody else, right?
That's right.
Do we have a pathology? After all this abuse, of course, we have a level of pathology. But it's not as deep as the pathology, the ones who gave us our pathology.
Come on.
See, like what I've said is that like people who do manifest destiny in slave trades are not healthy. Like these are not whole people. These are not sane people. These are not peaceful people, right? Because when you have those elements inside of your culture, you don't need to do that. Francis Cress Welsing talks about this at length. The Iceman Inheritance is a crazy book that goes into like what that looks like in European descendant folks. So Joy DeGruy-Leary started to give me the remedy to that and say, we are actually very, very functional people, considering the trauma that we went through.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if you hear a story about somebody who was an alcoholic, and you'd be like, damn, if that was me, I'd be smoking crack, meth. I'd be, just licking boots out to the street. Like, you see what I'm saying? All you're drinking is alcohol? Shit. Well, then you pretty strong. That's what we have to start looking at ourselves as.
That's right.
You see what I'm saying? In order to counterbalance that. But those are the 3 signs that I've seen that actually show up in real life.
Here's something else I want to add to that, right?
Before you add that in, I just want everybody to take a moment. Like, can everybody that's online right now just share this out? Because again, like, one, it's important for us to recognize these signs inside of ourselves, right? One, so that you can work on what you got to work on, but also so that those of us around, each other can begin to work on these things. Share this out. Let's make sure that this conversation is being spread around, because I don't hear enough conversations around solutions, right? And I think that's what we're talking about, is how do we see it? How do we recognize it? How do we begin to fix it in ourselves so that we can begin to heal, so that we can be better for our next generation, 7 generations Black? How do we do that? So, I know Lethal's getting ready to drop something, but I just want to encourage us to share this out again, because we're not having these conversations. I listen to a lot of Black YouTube and a lot of Black Facebook, and oftentimes, unless we're talking about educational panels, but from Black YouTube personalities, we're not talking about solutions. Oftentimes, we're throwing shots at each other, and it's constantly back and forth. And even though we could be talking about some good stuff, how do we begin to recognize signs without taking shots at each other to say, hey, this is the things we need to be looking out for. This is what we need to correct. This is some of the reasons why we're still in these situations, and how do we begin to come out of them? So share this out. My bad.
I got you.
What I wanted to add to that was, to Soul's point about mental health issue, right? I think a diagnosis that we can use or apply would be Stockholm Syndrome. And if you're not familiar with Stockholm Syndrome, then I would ask, that you look it up and you familiarize yourself with that, so that you can recognize and understand what the symptoms of that disease actually are. But you would also have to acknowledge that we are a captive people. Never get into your mind that we are a free people, because we're not, right? We are a captive people. There was an opportunity after, I guess, the so-called emancipation, right, where we could have gone home, right, back to our continent, back to our homeland, right? But that would have made us, let's put that up there, please. That would have made us more competitive. And so the decision was made to not only not send us back, but to keep us here in an oppressed state. You see what I'm saying? And so we have to understand that, right? So when you're doing things like believing and or trusting and or accepting information from white sources, while simultaneously discrediting that same information that's coming from Black sources, it's a form of internalized. That's why I asked for that definition to be put up, right? Because definition speaks to what occurred and what happened to some Europeans in Stockholm. You see what I'm saying? And it was developed after it was studied by Europeans. You see what I'm saying? So you don't have to listen and trust us, your own. You see what I'm saying? Because
you should.
We have a tendency to think that white ice is better. Go ahead, H. I'm sorry, brother.
No, it's a good point that you're making. I just want to give some very clear instructions around how we can go about this, because there's a sister that did a magnificent work that I think it should be brought in here. There's a sister by the name of Marimba Ani that put together a book called Yurugu. It's probably one of the most monumental books in Black thought. And the reason, one of the things that it's predicated upon is that what has happened to Black people is that we don't know, when we're looking at ourselves and when we're looking at our oppressors, we don't understand the behaviors that are rooted in our own culture and traditions, and behaviors that are have been placed on us through oppression. And so I think one of the beautiful things to begin to start the healing process is to begin to identify those things that are culturally relevant and those things that are culturally foreign to us as African people here in the United States. For instance, there's a popular GIF that goes around Facebook of a white person went into Africa and told a group of children, whoever runs around the tree and comes back first will be the winner of something, so and so and so forth. What happened when all those African children heard that is they all locked hands and they ran together. There was so one of the and they show a picture of all the African children crossing the line together and moving together because they rejected the notion of competing against each other in that way and means. And so one of the key features of our culture is complementary, not competitiveness. And again, this is where Theo's point around wherever capitalism is there, it has a corruptive force, and of course capitalism is predicated on overuse of competition as a means of extracting resources. And so I would begin for people who are wanting to detoxify from this, is to get a very clear understanding of what is your culture and what a holistic culture looks like. And if you want, you can go to, you can use the indigenous people of this land, you can use the indigenous people of Africa, you can use the indigenous people of Australia or Aborigines, whatever, what have you. Begin to understand the difference in culture and then watch how you function. Are you exhibiting competitiveness with your brothers and sisters in spaces where there should be cooperation, and so on and so forth? Go down the list, and that would begin to give you an understanding of things that you thought were normal, that they're not normal. They're actually really particular, and that's what she said. Urugu has done so masterfully. It is the minority on the planet, but it has made its culture seem like it is the general, like it is the norm, when in fact it's just a abolitionist culture, and we have to be able to identify.
Let me piggyback on what you just said.
Great,
let me piggyback on this. You're absolutely right. This cannot be overstated. The tribe that conquered and colonized the world made the world think their nature was human nature. It is not. When you read the works of Bartolomé de las Casas, this is my first window into this. Bartolomé de las Casas wrote about the indigenous people he ran into in the Caribbean when he came over with Christopher Columbus. And he said that these people were literally without guile, without malice, without jealousy or possessiveness, without all of these things, to the point where he said, we're trying to Christianize them, but they've already got Christ in them. They already, like Indians, was a mistake for indios, meaning in God, with God already. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And the same thing is said about the indigenous people up north when John Rolfe and John Smith came over, colonizing Pocahontas and them. And the same thing God said when the Portuguese explorers went through this great city of Benin in modern day Nigeria. They said, not only are the buildings large, well-polished, so shiny that you can actually see a reflection in them, not only are the streets wider than they are in Lisbon, Portugal, not only are there colors and smells like you've never seen before, but there are no locks on the doors because there are no doors.
That's right.
The people there don't have malice, they don't have hatred. Like we don't know our natural state.
No idea.
We don't know how we actually are. And when you look at these things that are supposedly human nature, the competitiveness, the cutthroatness, it's not actually how we indigenously are. If we were, Africans would have destroyed all of the megafauna in Africa centuries ago. We learned how to live with nature to the point that we're they're the last place on earth. They got big animals still. You see what I'm saying? That's how harmonious we are naturally.
Come on.
we've been uprooted from our natural context, and that comes with self-hatred apart with that, because a lot of us are angry for being dominated. We're ashamed of being enslaved. We feel like we are inferior because we couldn't fight, emasculated even, right? Which is why all these rappers emulate the white supremacist patriarch, the mobster, and the, you know what I'm saying, the Italian dude, you know what I mean? Rather than looking at like their own, because those models have been erased. So that's what happens. But their nature is not all of human nature.
That's right.
Because the conqueror wrote the history book, not the conquered. You feel me?
Come on.
It's not who we are.
Man, all you in the audience, I hope you're getting these jewels, and I hope, like Jice said, you share this with someone else. This is the beginning of change. Things will be televised, and they'll be televised right here on CTN Media. These are the conversations that have to take place in our community. I know we only have a few more minutes before we get out of here. I just want to touch on a couple of things before we do go. And when we talk about what this looks like, the internalized violent racism, and when we start to talk about what that looks like for localized crime, like Jice said, she doesn't like to use the black on black crime, but how does this affect our crime and what we're seeing? And like Theo's saying, a lot of this isn't even natural. We have just been pushed into this way of life, but it's real, and it's real today.
Right.
Well, when you're taught that those who look like you are worthless, shiftless, dogs, welfare queens, promiscuous, lacking of values and things of that nature, I mean, it only makes sense that after generations and generations and generations of that propaganda being pushed by all four estates of governance, right? So the rich, the church, the commoners, and the news and the media, right? After 25 generations of that, it is really no wonder that those who see us don't really value us, don't really value themselves. I mean, it's nothing, secret or spectacular about this phenomenon, right? Localized crime is in existence because, as the brother Theo just said and whatnot, right? We don't know who we are. We know not from who we come from. You see what I'm saying? We don't understand our roots. You see what I'm saying? We don't understand our elders, our ancestors. We don't understand who we come from. We haven't been taught to accept, to know, and to believe that we are the originators of what it means to be humane. We invented humanity. You see what I'm saying? And after 25, 30 or more generations, and it's like 25 years in a generation, right? Somewhere around there, right? According to westernized.
Less than that, because we're supposed to breed at 16. That's the thing.
Yeah. So you're talking hundreds of years. You see what I'm saying? Of just being told that you ain't worth shit. That's it. It's that simple. You see what I'm saying? And so, of course, you're going to have high rates of disrespect, high rates of disloyalty, high rates of maltreatment. Because why shouldn't I mistreat your ass? You a worthless piece of shit.
So this brings to the fore. There's a sister on here that I see this in the chat room. Her name is Wendy Talley, and she's a sister that is deeply involved as far as communal healing and talking about solutions. I want to make sure that we remain on solutions.
Yeah.
That this is not someone necessarily who's been, and this is to her credit, by the way, that has been conferred, letters by the Western academia as able to, manage Negroes in their unhealthy state. She is someone who has pulled that and seen it as her life's gift, and she's in community doing that work. And this is what we need more of, right? And these type of people need to be highlighted. They need to be celebrated. They need to be talked about. We need rap songs about them, right? This is what we need to begin to do in order to popularize those healers in our community that always have existed there, right? And so when we start talking about solutions, and this is really the work that that I'm really focusing in this season of my life, right, is the healing work that is necessary to detoxify ourselves from being involved in this culture for these many generations. Because I'm gonna tell you what, I've been involved in the activist movement, and Theo's here in Denver, Jice, Shay, you all know. One thing that I've seen happen over and over again, and when it happened this last time, I said, I'm never going to make this mistake again. We will be on the precipice of the Mason-Dixon line, and somebody will a black person will step on our heel, and we're going to turn around and get into a dust up and fight up and cuss up and shame and blame and spit on and piss on, and right, rather than go ahead and travel north, we're going to go ahead and get it. And that is because we have to put our healing first, else all we're going to do is replicate the same white oppressive systems that we have been impregnated with for the past 400 and so years.
Man, that's huge. I just want to read what this said real fast. She said, because I wanted to be liberated more than I wanted anything, even when I was the source of being stuck.
Boom.
That's leadership.
Boom.
That's community. That's what change looks like. Even in the midst of being stuck, giving your people hope. That's what that looks like. Thank you, sis, for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, I think there's also like understanding some level of where we've come from. Like human psychology has evolved as well, right? And so, these are issues. Like I always try and distinguish like what's a Black issue from like what's a people issue. And part of what H is also talking about is where we have that fear of what success looks like. Like people, they live in shit for so long that at some point they get to be a little bit afraid of what it looks like to be without shit. They built their life on shit. They live and breathe and, party in shit, right? And they can't even think about what it looks like to be out of that space. And you see this happen in a lot of ways when people self-sabotage because they are afraid to move forward. They're not quite sure what that movement forward looks like, what it's going to feel like. And also, we see a lot of people, and this is where I struggle in the space of activism, not for our organization, but what I see other organizations struggle with is when you've made your entire living off the system and off the problems that exist in the system. And your bread and butter is off of perpetuating those problems and not actually solving those problems, talking about those problems, highlighting those problems, bringing voice to those problems, but not actually solving those problems. And so I see so many Band-Aids get put on. We're really not getting down into the root and the source, which is why it's so important that we focus on economics and politics, because at the end of the day, this is a money game and it's a policy game. And those are the two things that run our lives. And so when we're seeing Black people commit crimes against Black people, we can absolutely acknowledge that the statistics show that people commit crime in proximity. So we know that. So Black people live in proximity to Black people, and so we commit crimes against each other. But there are other ways in which we enact violence against each other that are not always the physical violence. And that's what Abe is talking about. When we are right there about working on legislation or being strategic in something, or moving a process forward, overturning this, changing that, and then all of a sudden you see this bullshit. Did anybody notice, like, I don't even know who the fuck Jaguar Wright is, but all of a sudden, out of the blue, when we're in the middle of talking about COVID, presidents, elections, now you literally have this woman, Jaguar Wright, who's a talented singer, who ain't never really made everything she wanted to be. Now she's taking shots at Jada and Will and Alicia Keys and Qualib and all these people. And then all of a sudden, YouTube was flooded with Jaguar Wright and her exposing all this is completely irrelevant to anything that's actually happening. Who cares if Alicia Wright is a stud or not? Like, that has no bearing on anything that has to do with anybody Black in America other than Alicia and whoever she's sleeping with.
Come on.
it just boggles the mind that all of a sudden, in the middle of talking about all these things and really moving forward and really getting these things done, then you have this agent who comes in, and I don't know her from nobody. I ain't never heard of her until I saw all these videos popping up on my
None of us have.
about Jaguar Wright. Like, who the fuck is Jaguar Wright? Why do you care? Why she's
Look, I
so
think
these are the types of things that happen right on the cusp of, we're right in the middle of a presidential election where all these things are on the line. The Black reparations movement, the Black agenda, COVID-19, the state of the Black economy, all these things. And now you got YouTube flooded with Jaguar Wright. Like, who cares? Why?
Russian bot.
Yo, I mean, listen, this is what's so crazy about this. All that Jice said comes at a cost. When we decide to trip each other just south of the Mason-Dixon line, somebody's going to get caught and whipped. Somebody's going to mess up, and somebody's going to get pulled back into the system, and people are going to die. Period.
Come on.
And so at this certain point in time, I feel that the strength that the Almighty has had us inherit from our ancestors to overcome this system is so powerful. I'm not going to say that the system isn't effective, because it very, very much is. But whether or not we conquer it is completely within our power.
Come on.
It's completely within our strength.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to understand that about who we are. It's there. Systemic racism does exist. So somebody asked me, one of these low-key white supremacists, well, systemic racism is so real. How come you got a TED Talk and you're successful? I was like, because I'm stronger than it. That's why. Right. Like, it's because I'm bigger than it. But I'm bigger than it, and it exists, right? We have to get to the point where, like, we start to, one of the solutions is to really see the God in us.
Yeah.
When I started doing this mental exercise when I looked at Black American folks, and I started wondering, what did your earliest ancestor who stepped foot on this soil have to go through? What was the gauntlet that they had to achieve? And what was their child's gauntlet and their child's gauntlet? And it just gave me so much compassion for Black folks. We don't have compassion for Black people. We have a lot of criticism. And I started, like Joy DeGruy really opened my eyes that we must start to see each other with an open heart. That's right. Said, one of the things I've been saying it since my second video that ever went viral, I said, it's time for us to be Martin Luther King with each other and Malcolm X with the other. Because right now we got that dynamic flipped, right?
Oh.
We're really like that patient, tolerant, long-suffering thing that Dr. King had with his oppressor. We must start to have with ourselves, because we need right now to start feeling ourselves as human beings who have suffered and overcome. You see what I'm saying? And a lot of that does look like I had to acknowledge James Baldwin. He said that the myth of nigger is just that.
That's right.
We suffer under the myth of nigger.
That's right. Yeah.
When you see, like, you know what I'm saying, and I'm still dealing with my hood ass tendencies. I get mad, I'm like, man, this nigga, fuck this nigga up, man. I promise to God, nigga. You know what I'm saying? Like, I still deal with this program. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, on blood, nigga, 30, nigga, fucking, I'll roll up on all y'all niggas. Feel me? That's a program. Yeah. That's the program, right? And
or be somebody's weekend, but
yeah, right.
All right, I'm glad we're into
from degradation. So this is what I'm saying. Being aware of the myth of nigger, understanding that it's just a myth from the projection.
That's right. Of the white side.
Violent racists. It's a projection that I've internalized that I must overcome. Then once I see it, I'm conscious of the program, and then I counteract that program with compassion for my folks. That has been a strategy that I have used. Imagining your earliest ancestor, what did they have to go through to get you here? No matter how dysfunctional you may look to me. You think Candace Owens.
That's dope. That's dope.
Ooh, black people. I'm gonna call y'all Black people because that's what I identify you with. This has been a mindset moment, and this is gonna lead me to my mindset moment. You know what it is. At 7 Generations Black, we're geared to making sure we help shift perspectives and really give a moment for you to shift your mind. So as we start to close out, it's time for our mindset moment. I'm gonna start off with my guy, Mr. Lethal. Give us the mindset moment. How do we look at this through a 7-generational lens, the internalized violent right racism?
So first I want to say, like, from a solution-based perspective, if we're talking about what the sister Queen Mother Topaz just posted up there about PTSD, post-traumatic slave syndrome or post-traumatic slave disorder, then we need to seek out people in her profession, right? Those who are psychologists and who are certified and approach it from an African-centered perspective. There is an association out there, Association of Black Psychologists, and it is their job. They're sworn to it and they're committed to, providing that type of help, that type of support. Whether you think you are or whether you think you do need some type of counseling or not, go get it. Because at some point in time in your life, whether it be in the past, whether it be now, or whether it be in the future, you are going to experience what it means to manifest internalized, violent, white racism. So saying that, I want to leave you all with this. Being an African does not just mean you were born in Africa. It means you have embraced your culture and acknowledged your worth. We are African, not because we were born in Africa, but because Africa was born in us.
Namaste. I love that. My girl, Jice Johnson.
Oh, man.
Ooh, right. He always gets the words. I feel like he
I know, right?
Down. That was really good.
Yeah, I don't know where I'd go with this. I would say, off the top, my thought with a mindset moment is we have to recognize that we've been fed, like what white America sees is what we see. And so we're eating the consumption, we're consuming on a daily basis, very negative and stereotyped information about ourselves. And so every day, you have to reckon with that when you look yourself in the mirror. And I think that once we recognize that, it allows us to be very intentional about the messages that we allow ourselves to take in, what we discard, and then what we do with that information is, I think we still have a long ways. I think we can have a whole other conversation about what we do with that information. But I think it starts with recognizing that we are being fed this information about ourselves. And we have to release that in order for us to, really start to move forward. And so I talk about this all the time, but trauma is in our DNA. Yeah. And we're going to talk about it from a 7-generational lens. Be committed to removing that trauma in your DNA.
That's good. That's real good, man. Whew, mindset moment, Mr. H. Soul.
While I appreciate and agree with what Lethal was saying as far as psychiatrists and psychologists, I would say in addition to that, we need to go back and resurrect the tradition of the traditional healer. As best personified in my own psyche by the sister inside of Beloved who was out in the forest and would conduct ritual, right? Mm-hmm. Inside of women cry, children laugh, men dance. We need to resurrect the tradition of indigenous ritual that comes from our soul, that allows for that to happen. And there are people and there are societies and there are spaces that we need to begin to move back into in order to do that. Fortunately, I had the benefit of being involved with the Austere Set Society when I was in my early 20s that did these type of rituals and created this type of ritual space. And I know that there's other natural healing spaces and circles like that. So I think those two working in tandem with each other, right? To have sacred space where, indigenous people, they do sweats, right? And so that's a healing process that they go through that allows them to cry, to remove that spirit of the West off of them, if not for just a few moments, right? So that they can remember who they are in their natural spaces. So I would just encourage that people seek spaces where and healers that can create spaces like that, where we can have, women cry, children laugh, and men dance.
Man, I love that. Oh, we need that so badly. My guy, Theo E.J. Wilson.
Yeah, I think the mindset moment we have to have is, I'll just reiterate, look at each other with compassion. You find what you're looking for generally, including when it comes looking at your own people. If you want evidence of Black people being horrific, there's plenty of websites. World Star Hip Hop, they'll have that, right? If you want evidence of us being great, there's plenty of that too. And since both sides of the game are true, it's up to you which points you emphasize. And I had to overcome a lot of internalized racism, to the point where when I was 8 years old, I drew myself as white. I could draw very, very well. A lot of y'all know me, right? I could sketch. And when my teacher asked me to draw a comic strip of everyone in the class, I drew all of them accurately by myself, right? I didn't even realize that. I didn't even know what was going on. You know how many Kwanzaa celebrations I had to go to after that to uproot that? Like, I literally had to go to AXO from NAACP and a whole entire HBCU to get that out of my psyche, right? We've all got it. They do the baby doll test on Black children. And even Black children at the age of like 3 or 4 years old, if you ask them between the Black doll and the white doll, what's the good doll, they'll choose the white doll. If you ask them what's the bad doll, they'll choose the doll that looks like them. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We're being drip-fed images of Black inferiority from the time that we can literally perceive what's going on television. You see what I'm saying? And so know that. You have to be intentional about uprooting internalized violent white racism. And if you are not, then that's something that you will pass on to the 7th generation. You've been warned to make sure you uproot that crap for your progeny coming after you. That's what I'll say.
Ooh, that was deep, Theo. But that's real. You know how many Kwanzaa celebrations I had to go to? So I appreciate each and every one of you on this panel for being so authentic, for sharing your truth, and for sharing with our community what it looks like to think about this through a 7-generational lens. We know we have the power to change, and it starts with you guys making sure you connect the dots. Let's connect with one another. Like Theo said, we can choose which way we want to go. There's so many different ways, but I know that there's power right here. So make sure you're tuning in each and every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, where we are changing the narrative with 7 generations Black. Again, this is for us. This is for the community. And so if you tune in, we can take this to the next level. Being oppressed. What happened?
For the season, right, Shay? This is our last episode of the season, right?
We're on episode 7?
We go on a 2-week break, don't we?
You know what? You're right.
Let's go to LA, y'all. Let's go to LA.
No, we don't have to argue with these men at 3:45 every Tuesday. So this is kind of good. Those of you who say this is my first time linking in, do me a favor. Go back and watch some episodes. Let us know what your favorite episode was. Tag us on there. Talk to us. Give us some engagement and feedback, and let us know what you want to hear more about. What conversation do you want to get into again? What should we bring up again? What do we really need to dissect? We're here for you, community. So go check us out. You can see the archive and CTN Media on YouTube. Go to the 7 Generations Black tab. Check out the archive and let us know, because we want to get into this with you in the 3rd season. We're going into our 3rd season, y'all.
Absolutely. And let's also make sure that you go ahead and subscribe, make sure you share, and also support this channel. So one of the other things is we need to change the narrative. I think we've been talking about that, and that's what this station is. We're here to change the narrative. That's CTN Media, okay? So make sure that you support the platform. Make sure that you subscribe to the platform. If you are over on Facebook, make sure that you head over to YouTube. You see we have a community going on over there. Subscribe. And make sure that you share this out. So we'll be back with another a whole nother season of in-depth conversation that we need to be having here at this time in this place. This is the season for the Black community to really begin to uproot these deep-seated issues that we have. And this is the platform that we're having that conversation on. So, and we're excited to have that conversation with you. If you have suggestions on things you want to talk about, make sure that you hit us up. You can hit us up at info@bbiprofessional.com, and we will review those suggestions and see where we're going to fit them in.
We absolutely will review them. We appreciate each and every one of you. Remember, the most powerful thing you have is your mind. Keep it elevated, control what you're putting in it. And we'll be back next season, season 3. We can't wait to do this with you, change the narrative.
What's the date? What's the date for that, y'all?
Black. What'd you say?
What's the date for that? Let the people know what's the date for that.
Yep, the date we'll be back is on the 27th of October.
October 27th, 2020. We'll be back with you at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So until next time,
1 week before the election, y'all. 1 week before the election.
So you know we're gonna be talking about something real good. It might change the whole way you vote. I don't know. Just tune in. That's what I'm telling you. Tune in October 27th. You never know how deep the rabbit hole just might go. Peace and love, family. Until next time, hustle hard for your 7 generations Black. Stay Black, live Black, build Black, 7 generations Black. We love y'all.
Peace.